All right. All right. Thanks. All right, everybody. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the Hyde Park Kenwood Community Conference Transit Task Force for a community dialogue on transit and micromobility developments. My name is Ali Amora. I am a board member of the Hyde Park Kenwood Community Conference, the organization that's hosting tonight's event. Please note that we are recording the event. And tonight's forum is really just a chance for us all to get some updates, to hear about transit and micromobility developments in our community, get some of our questions answered. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be with us tonight, including those who are joining for the first time and our speakers. Welcome, and welcome back to those of you who have attended our community dialogues in the past. Before we begin, I want to take a minute to tell you a little bit about our host organization, the Hyde Park Kenwood Community Conference, or HPKCC for short. HPKCC is an independent community organization founded in 1949, and our mission is to connect people in a diverse, green, and safe community. We convene groups of individuals and groups to network and build community around multi-generational activities, community resources, and major issues that affect our future. The continuing goal of HPKCC is to meet the needs of our ever-changing community. Over the past 2 years, HPKCC has held numerous community virtual events that have attracted hundreds of folks on Zoom and received even more views on Facebook Live when we did do Facebook Live. You can view the recordings on HPKCC's YouTube channel and on our website, which is www.hydepark.org. And tonight's Transit Task Force Dialogue is a continuation of that same community building and information sharing that occurred over the last 2 years. So we encourage everyone to visit our website, www.hydepark.org, and check out our old community dialogues, which are all on the website. So tonight's forum is being hosted by our Transit Task Force, led by Roger Huff and Gary Osaward. So for our schedule tonight, we are going to hear from 4 speakers who will discuss developments in transit, and then we're going to follow that by a question and answer session. So a note on questions and answers. During the Q&A, we'll address questions submitted in advance, but we're also going to open up the floor to audience members to ask questions directly to the speakers. You can either raise your hand in the Zoom chat, I will see your hand, or you can put your question in the chat. We'll then either call on you or read your question from the chat or one of the questions from in advance. If you do want to ask a question, you'll be given no more than please 1 to 2 minutes to ask questions, and we'll try to get to everyone's questions throughout the evening. As a reminder to all of our participants, please remember that this is a public forum. Out of respect for all the participants, please use appropriate language. Keep your questions and comments brief and to the topic at all times. HPKCC reserves the right to mute or remove participants for inappropriate comments or comments that don't relate to the topic at hand. All right, so now we're going to begin our panel, and with us, I want to go kind of run through our speakers who we have with us tonight. We have from Metra, we have Michael Gillis, and we have David Rubino. From CTA, we have Jennifer Henry, also joined by Franny Ritchie. From the Department of Transportation, we have Mark Bennett. And from the Active Transportation Alliance, we have David Poe. And so we want to welcome all of our speakers. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. We're going to start off with Michael Gillis from Metra. So without further ado, I want to pass it on to Michael. I think you're still muted, Michael. There we go.
Yeah, you guys were muting me. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, it says it's disabled.
You should be able to do it now.
Yep. Okay, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me here tonight. As the host said, I am Michael Gillis. I'm the Director of Communications at Metra. My primary job is talking to the media and doing media relations, but I occasionally also will fill in to do community events as well. So I'm just going to talk about a few things that I think you guys might be interested in. Little mini agenda here. We have a new Metra Electric schedule starting next Monday. I hope you all know about the South Cook Fair Transit pilot, but I'm going to talk about that. I'll talk about some changes we have planned for the 59th 60th Street station, and then talk about some new ticket vending machines that we have on order. So the Metra Electric schedule changes, unfortunately for Hyde Park residents, these aren't really that big a deal for you. Most of the changes impact trains that we kind of split in half that might have served Hyde Park and the suburban lines. Now they're just serving Hyde Park, and then another train is serving outlying stations. So there's not a whole lot of changes for you guys. Just to keep you where we are with the Metra Electric schedule, there's about 125 scheduled trains going right now. That's about 82% of what we were running pre-COVID, but it's far and away more trains than we're running on any other line. The next closest is the BNSF line that has 91 trains a day. Right now, ridership has been going up and down between 35% of pre-COVID, which is about 10,000 passenger trips a day, and it's gotten up to 48%-ish, which is about 12,000, 13,000 passenger trips a day. That sort of segues to the Fair Transit pilot. I don't know how much background I need to give on this, but last January of 2021, Metra, in conjunction with Cook County and PACE, launched this pilot. And for Metra Electric riders, what's the big change is that Cook County is subsidizing a reduction in fares on the Metra Electric and the Rock Island lines. The idea is to assist South Cook County, which is more transit dependent than other parts of the county. And under Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle's leadership, we launched this pilot. Cook County just put out a report about the first year last week. And essentially on Metra, the results were that the Metra Electric and the Rock Island lines both are retaining are winning back a greater percentage of their pre-COVID ridership than the 9 other lines. So it's a good indication that this pilot is attracting people who might not otherwise be riding. It is helping people out who need transportation. Ideally, we would have launched this pilot in a non-COVID world, but we don't have that world, unfortunately. President Preckwinkle really felt strongly that we should launch it during COVID because a lot of essential workers use those 2 lines, and she really wanted to provide them a break. So right now we're in the 2nd year. It's supposed to be a 3-year pilot, at least 3 years. The fare reductions will continue during those 3 years. One of the things that President Preckwinkle said last week at her press conference announcing the results of this year is she did still want to work on the fare integration component of her goals. So that's something that we still need to work on and probably will be a priority in the next couple of years. This sort of illustrates what I was talking about. The Metra Electric ridership retained in 2021 was 25%. The Rock Island was nearly 23%. Metra as a whole was 19%, which puts all the other lines at about 17.8. So you can kind of see that those 2 lines did a lot better, or have been doing a lot better recovering from COVID than the system as a whole. One of the things we did under COVID is we introduced a new day pass. The idea there was, the monthly ticket has been our bread and butter ticket for as long as Metra's existed. You can see there before COVID, about 60% of our customers were using that monthly pass. Obviously under COVID, people aren't going in every day. They're not even going in every other day. But so we introduced this day pass because it gives you a lot more flexibility than the monthly. You can spend it every day. And then this year, last year when we introduced it, it was a $10 pass, which didn't really help the city zones all that much. It wasn't really a deal. So this year we introduced a $6 pass, which is good for 3 zones. It's been selling pretty well, and we do think it's not as good a value for Metra Electric riders because you're already getting the discount from the South Cook pilot, but on other lines it has been pretty popular. And then we do have a major rehab of the 59th 60th Street station planned. We're working with the University of Chicago. They have contributed some money to that. One of the things we're going to be doing is reopening the entrance at 60th Street. You can see all the other things we're planning there. It's a full bore renovation of the station with new elevators to the platform and covered platforms with full length canopies, new lighting, benches, signs. We're going to be introducing digital displays with train tracking information eventually at all of our stations, but when we're renovating this one, we'll be adding those. And there'll be some repairs to the viaducts as well. So that is in design right now. The design is going to be a long process. We hope to finish design in 2023, start construction that same year. It would probably take a couple years to finish. And then lastly, we, I guess it was late last year, our board approved a contract to begin buying ticket vending machines. In the first phase of those machines, which installation will be starting in January of 2023, one of the things we're doing is replacing all the old ticket vending machines on the Metra Electric line, so that those stations that used to have vending machines or do have vending machines now will be among the first stations in our system to be getting these new ones. And that includes 51st, 53rd, 55, 56, 57. These are brand new flagship design. They're weather hardened, they're ADA accessible. They will print tickets at the time of purchase, which just saves us a lot of money on inventory and printing costs. We can print special passes that we wouldn't be able to do now. So it's really kind of exciting. Ultimately, we hope to have vending machines in all 242 of our stations. That will go a long way to making, it really fast and easy for all our customers to buy tickets, because not all stations, in fact, the vast majority of stations have neither a ticket vending machines or an agent at them. So this will be a real big deal for our customers. I think I did about 10 minutes there.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Great. Just under 10 minutes, Michael. Thank you very much, Michael. So what we're going to do, everybody, is we're going to move on to our next speakers. And then once we're done with everybody, we will move on to Q&A. So our next speaker is from the CTA, and we have with us Jennifer Henry. Take it away, Jennifer.
There we go. I'm unmuted. And yes. I do need access to share screen though.
You got it.
Cool. Give it a second to take. It's still saying host disabled participant screen sharing.
Yep, hold on 1 second. Okay, try now.
Great, got it. Okay, and just move things around a little bit. So hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Henry. I'm in the Strategic Planning and Policy Group at CTA and I focus on bus. I really appreciate everybody taking time out of their evenings to come listen to updates like mine. And I'll get started. So the main news bullet here that we have for everybody is that CTA and CDOT are conducting a citywide public engagement process to shape what we're calling a Better Streets for Buses plan to represent consensus about where to focus bus priority treatments. This is very much a joint project with CDOT. It's really focused on the overlap between the public right-of-way aspects that CDOT manages that have some impact on the bus riding experience. So stop waiting streets, sidewalks, signals, all of those things can impact various aspects of the bus riding experience. What will the Better Streets for Buses plan include? It has two main components. The first is a proposed network of streets to target for bus-focused street treatments. And the second is a proposed toolbox of street treatments to consider as potential bus priority solutions on those streets. What it is not is a specific design plan for all of those corridors, right? So it wouldn't say that street X is going to get a bus lane and street Y is going to get a signal prioritization and street Z is going to get special bus stop shelters. It will say, here are streets X, Y, and Z, and here are the different tools that we could consider, but that work would be left for sort of later, more corridor specific or location specific design work that would take a number of factors into consideration. So I work primarily on bus. I have many things to say about the importance of bus, but one thing we want to highlight as part of this project is bus's importance with respect to equity. And that comes largely from its broader geographic reach and its greater ADA accessibility compared to rail. So this map on the left is census data. It's just commute to work trips as reported in census. It just shows, I mean, Metra is reflected as well. That's why there's purple dots where there are no CTA rail lines. But you can see that the bus geographic spread is pretty all encompassing. About 96% of Chicago residents live within about a half mile of a bus stop. And that compares to about 67% that live within a half mile of CTA rail. So all of these combine to make buses an affordable transportation option that many low-income residents and communities that have experienced historic disinvestment do depend on. What do we mean when we talk about bus priority? These are some examples that you may or may not be familiar with in the city that we have already. Jeffrey Jump was our first sort of big bus priority project. That was 2012, actually, that was put in place. It's on Jeffrey Boulevard between 67th and 83rd Street is where the majority of the treatments are. There's a peak hour bus lane and some enhanced stops and transit signal prioritization. Loop Link is maybe the most visible. It's right in the heart of downtown and it has large boarding platforms and red bus lanes that are in effect all day. It's on Washington, Madison, Clinton, and Canal Streets. And then the bus priority zones are sort of more of a spot treatment approach. And some of those went in 2019 on Chicago Avenue and on 79th Street. And I'll keep moving in the interest of time. So again, right now we are open for comment on the two main components of the plan. So the proposed network, which is sort of the where, and the proposed toolbox, which is sort of how. A little bit more about the network and a little zoom in inset box for your area. So the light blue lines show the corridors that are proposed for inclusion. It looks like a lot. It's about 56% of our route miles, about 14% of City of Chicago streets. We very well may call this as part of the comment process, right? But we picked these routes based on a combination of higher ridership, lower speeds, relatively high frequency, and sort of geographic completeness to make sure that the full city was covered. This is the same information in table form. So we highlighted the ones kind of in your area to see what's proposed for inclusion. The proposed toolbox has 3 categories. So there's a category that's focused mostly on bus stop areas and access to bus stops. There's the bus friendly streets, which has most of the sort of bus lane configurations or other adjustments to the street that might help speed a bus or keep it moving reliably. And then, excuse me, and then the bus-friendly intersections is where most of the tools that have to do with some adjustments to signal systems are. So all of these tools should help with one or more of the following in the right context. So either improving the experience of accessing or waiting for the bus, helping to streamline bus movement or reduce bus travel times, and to make trips more reliable and comfortable. Quick overview of our project timeline. We launched in mid-April. We have a 6-week public comment period that's open right now and ends at the end of May. We're doing 3 virtual public meetings, 2 of which are over, but 1 of which is tomorrow at 12:30. And then we'll be posting a recording after we're finished with our last one. Then the public comment period ends at the end of the month, as I said, and then we'll be going into a phase where we look at all of the feedback that we've gotten, work with CDOT and other stakeholders to sort of synthesize and figure out how to revise. There will be some follow-up public outreach, but we're waiting to define that more specifically until we see what kind of feedback we really get. And then with the goal of wrapping up and having a final plan by the end of the year. So how to shape the plan? There's a variety of ways. Because we did have to plan this outreach campaign during the pandemic, we are leaning hard on virtual. So we have a website with several interactive tools to help gather feedback. We have the public meetings, as I mentioned. We also, if you don't want to use the website, we have a phone number that you can text or call, and an email address that you can send any questions or comments to, either the phone number or the email address. We do have paper comment cards as well, which have been distributed to all local libraries and aldermanic offices. So one of the sort of key takeaways here is just to help us spread the word. We have social media on both CTA and CDOT's accounts that can be reposted pretty easily, or we're happy to supply anyone with a newsletter blurb or the comment card to print or whatever if you'd like. And also just you yourselves visit the website or give feedback in whatever way you'd like. 1 more minute on the website just to give you a little bit of a sense. So it's betterstreetsforbuses.com. We have 2 interactive maps that let you zoom in and out on your neighborhood. One of which, the one on the bottom here with the blue lines, that one's focused on which corridors should be in and out. And so there's little pins that you can drop that say, I think this one should be in, or I think this one should be out. The one right above that is about sort of the more qualitative and other aspects of experiencing the street. So you can also say, I think parking is really important here, or I have trouble crossing the street here, or my bus is always late right here. And there's some pre-populated pins, but you can also write whatever comment you want in and drop that where you'd like. The toolbox, the one in the upper left is kind of an ideas wall format, and it has the 21 tools that were in our original toolbox, and then people have added more. And you can go in and comment on it, read a little bit more about the tool, add your own tools, heart them to give them more votes. So that's how we're presenting the toolbox in a somewhat interactive way. And then finally, there's a survey. So that's the one with the little check marks there. So that's just a brief online survey asking you more about your bus use if you use it. And if so, what would make your bus ride better or make you more likely to ride it? And that is my quick spiel. And I'm happy to go into more detail on any of that at the end, but I think you guys are moving on to the next presentation for the moment.
Yes. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much. Okay, so our next presenter is going to be Mark Bennett from CDOT. So Mark, the floor is yours.
Thanks, everyone. As I'm getting screen sharing allowed, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Mark Bennett. I'm a planner and urban designer, and I support the Chicago Department of Transportation with a couple different micromobility projects, including scooters and Divvy Bike Share. And I've been involved with scooters in Chicago since 2020. So we learned a lot from that pilot. And scooters are already back in the city and more to come. And so we'll talk through that. Let me get my presentation up and we can jump in. All right, is that showing up for people? Great. So the first thing I want to highlight is a lot of you probably have already seen scooters in Chicago. The city has ran 2 4-month pilots, one in 2019, one in 2020, and that 2020 pilot was citywide, featured about 9,000 devices at its peak, which makes it really one of the biggest scooter deployments to ever happen, probably in any city in the world. And then in October 2021, the city council passed an ordinance that created a new license. So previous to that, there was no permanent business function for a company to come in and rent shared scooters on the public way. And so CDOT and the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection administer that license. And per the ordinance, no more than 3 licenses can be awarded at any time. So we can have up to 3 companies operating shared scooters. The ordinance also, however, allowed the city to negotiate its contract with Lyft that operates the Divvy system to integrate scooters into the Divvy system. So a potential of 4 different operations of scooters. The outcome of that is the city and Lyft did negotiate for scooters with the Divvy system, and that's already rolled out. You might have seen that in the news. If you've been in the loop, you might have seen those start coming out. Those are in a pretty limited service area that I'll go over in just a second, but by next month, they say they expect about 1,000 scooters to be added to the existing Divvy system. And then for the business license, right now 3 companies have been selected to operate under a 2-year license. So that's Spin and Lime. Those companies both operated in 2020. And then a company called Super Pedestrian, which operates currently in a few dozen cities across the country, will be new to Chicago, but scored very highly in our selection process. These companies were already planned to be actually rolling out in the city and rolling out citywide. But there are a couple companies who did not receive a license, and per the ordinance, they have a right to appeal, and they are exercising that right to appeal. And until that appeal process goes forward, these 3 licensed companies' deployments are on hold. Our hope is that's in the magnitude of in the coming weeks. So hopefully sometime in June, we'll see more citywide scooter deployment from these companies. So as far as operations go, just like in 2020, this will be a citywide, and actually it'll be even more citywide than 2020 because downtown is now in the operation area. But the city is really easing into that downtown operation. So, which I'll discuss in a second. Similar to 2020, we also do have an equity priority area. This is based on a number of different health, mobility, economic, jobs access outcomes. It's the area highlighted in blue here on the map, and the scooter companies that have won a license from the city must deploy at least half of their fleets, half of their devices to that area. So we're ensuring that devices are not just going to wealthy neighborhoods or perhaps neighborhoods that have traditionally been high profit centers for these companies, but that they're distributed to areas that really can benefit from a new mobility device. As I mentioned, downtown operation is also allowed. Right now, it will just be Divvy scooters operating in downtown. And the reason for that is because the Divvy scooters can dock in the Divvy bike stations. So right now, there isn't a lot of precedent for testing scooters in an environment like the Loop. And so we're kind of easing into it by allowing Divvy scooters. And then once the other 3 licensee companies deploy, they basically have 2 months to show us that they have a high compliance rate and that there's a high demand for their devices. And if they can prove that, if they can prove they're good partners, then they too will be allowed in a limited fashion to operate in the downtown area. And you can see that's classified on this map by that sort of dark black outline. So we call it the core area, the greater downtown area. That's approximately north to down to the interstate, and then to the west. Let's see, looks like that's California there, or Ashland, I should say. And then the initial fleet size will be 1,000 per operator. So sometime this summer, you might see about 4,000 devices. on city streets, and there are opportunities for these companies to deploy more as they see demand. I wanted to touch specifically on safety and some important safety considerations with the programs. So the companies are responsible for ensuring riders follow the rules, which means no sidewalk riding. But the city does require all companies have some sort of sidewalk riding detection technology. Each company has a different technology, and the city is going to keep testing those technologies and watching them very closely as these scooters roll out. But all the operators are capable, if they deem it's necessary, to implement a technology where they can actually slow or stop a scooter if it's been detected on the sidewalk. So this is something that hasn't existed in previous pilots. It's, to be honest, not widely tested. Chicago is going to be one of the first cities that's really requiring it on a large scale. We have seen the companies demonstrate it. So we know in theory and tested in real world conditions, it works. But the city is going to keep tracking it very closely as it starts rolling out into wider use. Just like in 2020, scooters must be locked to a fixed object like a bike rack shown here to end a trip. That worked. We found that that improved parking conditions pretty substantially over 2019. So that'll be continuing. Companies have 2 hours to fix a complaint. So if you submit a parking complaint in 311, say a scooter isn't locked up, it's on private property, it's blocking a fire hydrant or a door, that company is going to get that request, and they have 2 hours to respond to that request, and there will be penalties and consequences if the companies fail to meet that, including but not limited to the city can impound a device if the companies aren't taking care of it, and there's a pretty hefty fee to compensate the city for that service. And then something new that this year is scooters can't stay in one place for more than 5 days. So we did hear some reports from 2020 of people said there's been a scooter on my street and hasn't moved for a week or 2 weeks. So we definitely, we want scooters to be able to stay in one place without being rebalanced over frequently, because that leads to higher carbon emissions for the vans that go around. But if a scooter's been there for 5 days, we're telling the companies that they have to find a new spot for it, find a new area with demand for it. In addition, operators are also required to meet education and outreach requirements. They need to meet a certain number of those requirements throughout the city. All operators have to distribute free or discounted helmets. All operators have agreed by becoming license holders to closely coordinate with the mayor's office for people with disabilities. And they will be deploying seated devices that provide a scooter option for people of different abilities. And then where the city is requesting quite a bit of data and reporting from these companies. So they're going to have to follow up on incidents and crashes and reports, and also provide us detail on utilization. So if you do see an issue with a scooter parked incorrectly, you should use the 311 system. There is a specific scooter parking request that you can fill out. Most importantly, we want to make sure that people are filling out the location, but also the company name, so we can then the city can pass that on to the company specifically. Basically, we're trying to streamline how much the city has to do and putting the burden on the companies who have these licenses and are standing to make profit off of this enterprise. We want to make sure that those requests get to the companies, and the way to do that is to report them through 311 so that the city can keep those companies honest, because then we can track whether they're actually responding to those reports. And finally, if you want more information, you can go to chicago.gov/scooters, hopefully a pretty memorable URL. We're building out that site ahead of the full launch, but that has a bunch of safety tips. It has information on the rights and responsibilities of the consumer and also the operator. And it also shortly will have contact information for each of those scooter operators. So we're looking forward to seeing a permanent program, and we're getting that up and running. And I think in the next few weeks, most Chicagoans should start to see scooters around their neighborhoods.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Okay, we are moving on to our final speaker. We have David Poe from the Active Transportation Alliance. So David, without further ado, the floor is yours.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm the Director of Planning at the Active Transportation Alliance. We are a coalition of people who are working to make walking, biking, and public transit safe and equitable options for getting around Chicagoland. I'm going to go ahead and add scooting to that list tonight too. So first of all, Metra, I would like to thank you and Pace and Cook County on behalf of my organization for your incredible work on the Fair Transit South Cook pilot. It's a huge transit success story, and the pilot has increased transit access for so many people on the south side and in southern Cook County. Although the price did cut in half for a lot of people taking Metra Electric and the Rock Island line, there are still big gaps in service throughout the day and on the weekends. And as you know, a lot of people, frontline workers, rely on that transit service. And so my organization would like to encourage Metra to seek dedicated funding so it can run more trains along the Metra Electric and Rock Island lines. Metra owns this right of way, so it doesn't have to compete with freight operators to run these trains. So we would love to see more trains running frequently throughout the day, like Toronto has moved towards. The density is there, we just need the frequency of service. But great job on this Fair Transit South Cook pilot, it's awesome. CTA, the Better Streets for Buses project is an incredible and transformational project, and ATA would like to commend you and CDOT's leadership on this project. A lot of the design and street improvements that we're seeing on this project website are components of bus rapid transit, such as bus only lanes and transit signal priority, both which you mentioned, Jen. BRT offers a lot of advantages, the same advantages of rail at a fraction of the cost. However, this project, as you mentioned, will stop short of recommending true BRT corridors complete with bus-only lanes throughout our city. Riders want dedicated bus lanes. As a daily CTA rider on the 8, I would love nothing more than some dedicated bus lanes up and down Halsted Street. In New York City, the 14th Street bus saw weekday ridership increase 24% and weekend ridership increase 30% after the installation of a dedicated bus lane. Chicago lags way behind in implementing dedicated bus lanes. New York has 138 miles, LA has 108, and Chicago has 11. If ridership on CTA is struggling, then show our city how transformational BRT can be by implementing true BRT on a few of these corridors. CDOT and BACP, I'd also like to commend the city's leadership on advancing the scooter network and improving mobility for so many people. The second pilot you mentioned included service in the Hyde Park area, which is fairly rich in transit and bike infrastructure. Already, these new scooters are being introduced and bike ridership is still booming. And I saw someone commented in the chat, they asked if the scooters can't be used on the sidewalk, where can they be used? And I'd like to recommend the bike lanes. However, our city is lagging behind on building safe bike lanes with concrete barriers that protect our most vulnerable travelers. And the recent climate action plan that the city released committed to building 25 new miles of protected bike lanes over the next few years, which is great. But we should be churning out these bike lanes at a more rapid rate to protect our most vulnerable users. Thank you all for your work on improving mobility across the region. I have lots of questions for all of you, but I would like to say that my organization and all of our travelers across the Chicagoland region very much appreciate everything that you're doing daily to improve mobility for all of us. Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. And thank you to all of our speakers. Okay, so we are going to move into our Q&A. A couple of housekeeping things. So as there was a question in the chat, and then Roger responded that there will be a recording posted, www.hydepark.org on our website, and an email will be sent out when it is available. Thank you, Roger, for putting that in the chat. So in terms of the slide presentations, if any of our presenters want to make it available, and you, if you could put maybe your contact information in the chat, if you will make it available, so anyone who wants a copy of that can reach out. All right, we are going to move right into questions. So, and I know that David has some questions of his own for everyone. We'll get to those as well. So yes, so what we're going to do is we're going to raise our hands. Thank you, Brian Glenn, for being our example and raising your hand. You can also put your questions in the chat, and then we have some questions in that were submitted in advance. So we're going to kind of go through a little bit of each of those. So we had some questions, and I will direct this to our folks from CTA. I'm going to go with a moderated question first, then I'll go to the chat, and then we'll go to our folks with the hands raised. So the questions we got in advance were for CTA. Were currently trains, buses, and CTA stations are dirty and unsanitary. People list that as a major reason they don't ride CTA. During the COVID pandemic, drivers cleaned hourly and sanitized trains and buses. Currently, homeless living on trains leave garbage and human waste on train and bus handrail stations. Could the homeless be paid to clean and sanitize the train, bus, and stations? It provide money for the homeless and clean up the trains and buses. So I'll hand it over to CTA to respond in whatever way you want. Jennifer, you're muted. Oh, you need to be unmuted. Yes.
There we go.
There we go.
I could try to sign out an answer, but so full disclosure, I do not work on, in any of these key areas, right? So I think I would say that I think our cleanliness routines are still the same. I don't think that we've changed them. Don't quote me on that. The latest information should be on our website about that. If there's a specific location that you're seeing issues, it's always helpful to, and I'll put this email address in the chat, to send a note to feedback@transitchicago.com. I can tell you personally, like, you may feel like you're sending that into a void of bureaucracy, but they really do get forwarded around. You don't always get a super personal response because our operations folks don't always have a chance, but they do see them, right? So if there's issues, it is really helpful to be made aware of them that way. So I would say that for cleanliness. I know that we have been working with the city on various ways to address homelessness on the trains, but I don't know the details of that, and I don't know if there's any sort of employment programs or whatnot. That would, I'm sure, depend on the individual circumstances, so I can't speak any more specifically to that. But again, if you send that question to feedback, it could get routed to someone who could give you a more specific answer. You can follow up with me as well if you'd like offline, but I don't know the answer to that one.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I want to note, thank you, David, for your comment in the chat that you've gotten responses to all the emails that you sent to CTA as a resident. So thank you for the confirmation. Okay, so we had a question from Coretta Pruitt earlier that, David, you addressed, but maybe I'll just open it up if anybody has any other responses, but about will the Divvy scooters share the same space as the bikes within the bike lanes? And the second question was, what's the longevity of those scooters? So if anyone, I'll put it out there to the panel if anyone wants to address that. Yes, Mark.
Thanks for that mute. Yeah, scooters will generally share the same space as bikes, which is vehicle travel lanes, bike lanes. The one space where you won't necessarily see scooters and divvy bikes mixing is the park district operates under their own set of rules, and those set of rules do not allow the shared scooters to operate on the 606 or the Lakefront Trail, but they do allow the divvy bikes to operate in those spaces. So currently, scooters won't operate in those spaces, but otherwise, a pretty consistent overlap with where scooters and bikes will be operating. And then as far as the longevity of scooters, that's a really good question that I don't have a specific answer to. What I do know is when shared scooters first appeared out of thin air a few years ago, the companies really just bought as many cheap devices as they could and threw them on the ground. And now what we're seeing is the companies that have actually survived are investing in building their own models. And so they have a little more stake in the game, and they realized that they were losing money fast when their scooters broke down after a couple of weeks. And so I don't know what it is, but it has improved substantially. I think my guess is there's probably room to grow for their supply chain and their sustainability. But what I do know is the devices are a lot more robust and they're lasting longer than they did even just a couple of years ago.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Okay, let's take a question from our Zoom call here. We have Brian Glenn, one of HPKCC's very own board members. If we could unmute Brian, and Brian, if you want to activate video, maybe.
Sure. Yeah.
How you doing, Brian?
Good, thank you. I think what you were searching for earlier is Brian is being exemplary by raising his hand first. So thank you for that, Ali.
I was searching for that word, and that is exactly what was missing from my vocabulary. But yes, exemplary, Brian.
Some of the folks have asked questions about sanitation on the, especially on CTA. I wanted to ask a question about the scooters, because I know that I see those bikes, the Divvy bikes all over the place. I mean, the Divvy bikes are in people's garages. I think I saw a guy in Texas with one of the Divvy bikes. So, I mean, I see people putting them on their own car like they're their own. I mean, I'm not understanding how that's happening. So I'd like to understand how, one, are you guys going to, I know that you have the system in place to be able to supposedly stop it when it hits a certain time limit, et cetera. But like more specifically, how do you guys intend on policing that? Because, you know, that seems like a real issue. One, keeping those from just being all over the place and people finding ways around the limitations that are supposed to be there. But then two, keeping people from taking them and doing what they want with them once they are, you know, broken down or whatever they do. So I'd love to hear someone address that, because I think that's a real issue in a city like Chicago, where people are pretty nifty at finding ways to get around certain things. So.
Thank you, Brian. And I'll open up to the floor again for whoever wants to jump in. All right, we'll go. We can unmute Mark and David. All right, we can go Mark and then David.
Yeah. So one thing is, it's a really good question. Obviously, these private companies that have these licenses now are super interested in that question because they don't want to lose their devices. One thing is the scooters themselves will all have GPS, and the e-divvies all have GPS. The blue divvies are basically there's no digital component to those, and so the blue divvies, the city does a pretty good job, and Divvy does a pretty good job of tracking them, but they're a little bit easier to slip through the cracks. Whereas the e-divvies and then these e-scooters have GPS units built into them. The e-scooters also, like the e-divvies, they require a motor. They're really pretty heavy, and they require a motor to do much. If you tried to, if you stole an e-scooter, it would eventually run out of battery, and then it would also be disabled by the company because they'd realize it had been taken offline, and then it wouldn't really be useful because an e-scooter without a motor would be a pretty big bummer to ride. So I think those are probably a couple things that help the scooters stick around a little bit longer. And then the other thing is the requirement that they are locked up at the end of the trip definitely helps with that as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. And okay, so actually, David, you have a question. You have a question for Metra. So why don't we go to David, and then we'll take some questions from the chat and some questions that were submitted in advance.
Great. Well, so I'm a former daily Metra rider, and your $10 all-day pass improved my quality of life dramatically. So thank you, Metra, for all of the work you've done with the Ventra app and your all-day pass. One question I do have for Metra is, does the provider plan to move away from this commuter-oriented service toward more frequent all-day service? There's still huge gaps throughout the day in service on a lot of the lines. And I'm wondering what the plans are over the long term to move from a commuter-oriented service pre-pandemic to something that is more frequent throughout the day for the post-pandemic world.
I think, Michael, you're trying to get unmuted. There you go.
Okay, there we
Awesome.
go. So that's a really good question. Obviously, coming out of the pandemic, we've recognized that the commuting patterns have changed, and maybe the pandemic sped up things that were already happening. But we have seen sort of a shift away from the 9 to 5 commute to people wanting to use midday service. And we actually have seen a pretty good rebound on weekends compared to weekdays. So we're aware of that, but you're probably aware there are some limitations. On the UP North line, we did introduce a schedule that expanded the midday service. That line doesn't have any freight on it. It was pretty easy to drop those schedules. And we've seen pretty good results there. The UP North line has been, I mean, it really is a densely populated corridor. It lends itself to that. So to the extent we could do that, we did. We tried something a little bit similar on the BNSF line. Of course, that is a major freight rail corridor, and we're limited by how much commuter service we can put on those tracks. Because BNSF Railway, which owns the tracks, has a major freight presence here. We have similar issues with UP West line. That's a major freight corridor for the Union Pacific. As you point out, we do own the Metra Electric. We do own the Rock Island line. We've tried, before the pandemic, we were doing 20-minute service from Hyde Park. That's scaled back a little bit as we're rebounding from COVID. We do have sort of a manpower issue on some of our lines in bringing service back. So it's definitely something we're aware of. It's harder on some lines, impossible on others. We don't own North Central Service or the Heritage Corridor. Those are also freight corridors for CN, and if to allow us to run more passenger trains, they'd be charging us a lot more in trackage rights, so the costs go up a lot. But I think you will see us where we can step in that direction. It is costly, and it does take up a while to get to that critical mass, right? You start running trains, people don't catch on immediately, but you're right, the more frequent service you have, the more people start to use you, and it's certainly we're aware of that, and it's something we're interested in looking at. I will say that our CEO Jim Derwinski has been talking a lot about that, and I think you know, right now we're surviving on federal COVID relief. It's kind of yin and yang with trying to make that last as long as it can until we can get back to where we were ridership wise. So do we spend a lot of that money experimenting with things, or do we make it last longer in the hopes that by the time it runs out, we're back to normal, or we've found a new subsidy somewhere? So those are the kinds of things we're thinking about.
Thank you, Michael. Actually, Michael, stay there because I have another question for you from our pre-submitted questions. And David, I see your comment in the chat that you're mainly concerned with Metra Electric and Rock Island lines. But this question, Michael, is could all cars on Metra be fitted with electrical outlets for plugging in mobile devices while commuting? And there is a comment from the person who submitted is that Metra is their commuting office.
Yeah, so we are doing that. it is a slow process because as we bring cars in for rehab, which we do, it should be about every 15 years, but the length got extended just to funding issues. But as we bring cars in to rehab, and we rehab about 30 to 40 a year, we are putting electrical outlets on those cars. We have something like 850 cars. So if you do 30 a year, you can see how long it'll take to get to the whole thing. We did place an order for new cars. Those will have electrical outlets. They'll have all kinds of bells and whistles. They're low-level boarding, so more doors so they can load faster, and they'll have all the modern amenities. So we are doing that, but it's not something that's happening overnight.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I do want to be mindful of time. And so I know that Jennifer, you have to go soon. So if anyone has any final questions for Jennifer from CTA, please feel free to ask now. Otherwise, we'll move on to some other questions we have. All right. Okay, and Jennifer, whenever you have to go, but thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, so I saw Coretta Pruitt, you had your hand up earlier. I don't know if you still had another question you wanted to ask, but I wanted to give the floor to you if you wanted to ask a question. Oh, we get there.
Oh, no. Oh, no, I'm good. You answered it. I had put it in the chat, but I didn't know the protocol of how you were going to be asking the question. So it was answered. Thank you.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then, yes, we have Deborah Strauss. You're raising your hand. If we can unmute Deborah.
1 second. Find her on the list here. There she is. All right. Should be have the request to unmute.
Oh, I think you're still unmuted, Deborah.
Should I try?
Yes, that's great.
Okay.
We can hear you now.
Okay, thanks. I put this in the chat, but you seem to be looking at hands, so I'm jumping in.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I'm very concerned about pedestrian safety. And while I'm a former cyclist and I love the scooter idea, I'm really scared about more objects to knock me over when I'm trying to walk the sidewalk. And my question is specifically about stop signs. I know cyclists are supposed to stop at stop signs. That is something you see very rarely. And if they're polite, they let the pedestrian finish crossing. But otherwise, they have the right of way, right? They think they do. And now I'm wondering about adding scooters to that mix. So who else do I have to dodge when I want to cross the street?
Thank you, Deborah. I'll open up to the floor. Let's see. Mark, yes, I was going to call on you. Okay, Mark there you are, you're unmuted.
Hey, Deborah, thanks for asking. I assume that the question at the end is somewhat rhetorical, but to your specific point, it's definitely a big concern of the city and something that we weighed pretty carefully when we tested the two pilots. Our hope is, from having tested the sidewalk detection technology, our hope is that we're going to see probably not perfect compliance, but significant improvement in compliance. But we, as I mentioned, this is going to be one of the more wide scale deployments of that technology. So we want to see that works. One thing that the companies do have an incentive to be good partners. They need to ask the city to deploy more devices. We've started up their business license with a pretty small number of devices, only about 1,000 per company. and they need to demonstrate to the city over the first 2 months that they're good partners, that they're educating their riders, that they're removing riders who are not using their devices correctly, that they're removing riders who are riding on the sidewalk, and that they're doing proper education and outreach. And if they can't meet the goals that the city has set, then the city has the right to deny them more devices. So we've tried our best to create an incentive where each company has a lot of responsibility to educate their riders and remove riders who are misbehaving, or otherwise they stand to risk not being able to deploy the number of scooters that they want to. So those are a couple of the things that we're working towards to help address some of those issues.
What about stop signs specifically?
Yeah, stop signs. There's no technology right now that addresses that. Certainly, that's part of. We do require that the companies deploy both education and also quizzes for the riders. So riders have to affirm that they know the rules of the road. That's probably about the best approach that we can take right now with that.
Okay, thanks for trying.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for your question, Deborah. We have one more question for Jennifer. Here from Catherine, it says that, Jennifer, I have a recurring question about why those of us living in Hyde Park cannot get the number 6 traveling from the loop back to Hyde Park in the evening. As the festivals return, we want to take CTA, but we get stranded traveling home. 2 or 3 other buses going north will come along before the 6.
Yeah, I saw that, and before I left, and sorry if my chat looks awkward, I was trying to post the contact information one more time, which I will do before I leave. I do not know the specific schedule of the number 6, and so I can't speak to that. I can pass it along to our service planning department, and Catherine, or I don't know if you'd prefer a response to come through the group or to Catherine directly, but I can try to follow up with an answer afterwards. Do you guys have a preference on how I route that?
I think you could follow up with the question later, maybe, and then we can figure out with the transit task force how to disseminate that information.
Okay, I will copy her question on so that I can get it moving, and then if someone wants to just shoot me an email from the transit task force, I can respond to you then.
Awesome. Yes, Roger has his hand raised. Thank you, Roger.
If any of the presenters have additional information to share based on some of the questions, you've gone back, talked to your colleagues, if you send it to the transit@hydepark.org, we will include that information in the email that we send out, telling all of the people that are here and people on our list about the videos available. So we can get the answers not only to the person that asked the question, because other people may be interested in that same thing. The number 6 bus does a lot of service for Hyde Park, and so that's a broadly based question. So thank you, Jennifer.
Sure, and I see there's at least one person who also said ditto on that question. Would you mind, or would someone mind putting that? I probably have it in my inbox, but it would be helpful if I got the transit TIF email that you said. Could somebody drop that in the chat too, and I'll grab it before I leave?
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, and thank you for being with us. I know you have to go soon, but we really appreciate you being here and all the information that you shared and answering all of our questions. So thank you. Okay, so I know that I want to go to David Poe. I know, David, you had another question. And then I see Neighbors Who Vote. We'll get to you as well. And then we have a couple more that were submitted in advance. And I think, David, your question is for Mark, right?
Yeah, for CDOT. So really quickly, if we're introducing these new scooters to improve connections in and around the city, and bike ridership is also increasing, I wanted to hear more about CDOT's plans for making it safer for cyclists and scooter riders in and around Hyde Park and Kenwood.
Yeah, that's a good question. Unfortunately, it's not my area. So I don't want to speak for folks I promise I'm not trying to deflect. It's just I'm not the one who spends 12 hours a day knee deep in bikeways discussions. So besides directing you to online content, unfortunately, I'm not the best person to answer that question. I know the commissioner takes a lot of time to talk about it. It's clearly something that she cares about, and difficult to get a 10,000 pound wheel rolling, but there are a lot of people in the department who are trying to push that and get it rolling.
Yep, I hear you. Well, I appreciate your honesty. I think a lot of cyclists are scared of those 10,000 pound cars coming at them. So the more protected bike lanes we can get, the better.
You and me both.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, David. I know that Neighbors Who Vote, you have a question. I believe your question is for Jennifer, who's still on. So you can either ask or you can put your question in the chat, whatever you guys want. Could you activate your video too?
Yeah, I can't undo my video, unfortunately. My name's Julia Klein. I got the Eventbrite through our Neighbors Who Vote account. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Jennifer, the comment regarding number 6, and I also echo the comments that have already been made about, CTA and Metra and Divvy and so forth. They're all doing a really great job. I haven't had a car in 10 years in the city of Chicago, and it's because of how good transit is. And of course, there are lots of complaints. I lived on the north side for years and years and years, and like as I said, I've been transit dependent for most of that time. And I found that all the north side buses were always very reliable inside the app. And when I moved to Hyde Park 3 years ago, I was beyond aggravated with the lack of reliability of the number 6. And specifically, and it's not, the number 55 is like a German train. So I don't know why the discrepancy, it's the number 6 specifically. And in my complaint, in addition to the one that was already shared about not being enough of them coming from downtown back into the neighborhood, often in both directions, I'll be standing looking at the CTA bus tracker app, and it says that there's a number 6 coming in 5 minutes, in 3 minutes, in 2 minutes, and then it just disappears off the app. Like, why does that happen? That's or almost worse, it says that the bus will be there in 4 minutes, and then it actually shows up in 1, and you've missed your bus. And it's the number 6 consistently. So what is that? What's going on, and how do we fix that?
So I feel your pain, and I have had similar experiences. I don't know all the technical details about how the bus tracker app works. I know sort of the broad strokes, and sometimes there can be like a weird thing about like the terminal of a bus route or something that throws it off. And sometimes it's easily fixable, and sometimes it requires like an entire update to software or schedules or something like that. The most important thing you could do though, and it's a little bit of an effort, but like if you're using the bus tracker app straight off of the CTA mobile site, then it will give you the bus number, like the number that's actually associated with that vehicle, right? And since I work for CTA, I know this, right? And so whenever I experienced issues with bus tracker, whichever type, I would record that and send an email to feedback, the email address that I put in earlier, and say, this bus wasn't on bus tracker and it should have been, or vice versa, to the degree, just as much detail about the location, the time and whatnot, because sometimes it's just that the equipment on the bus is not working and has to be fixed, right? But sometimes it's a broader problem with either signal connectivity or the way that it's configured at the terminal, or different time. We have things called time points that are built in. So it gets really wonky really quickly, and I just can't give you a straight answer about any one problem, but I can tell you that folks are working on upgrading it. And when there's a specific problem, if we can get the most specific information about what bus, where, and when, that gives us the best chance at being able to fix it. And I can certainly relay the like general problems, and the number 6 seems to have particular issues. I can relay that. But the next time it happens to you, if you want to shoot an email to feedback, CC me as well. That would be super helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. And thank you for our neighbors who vote. Okay, so let's move. Well, we have some other questions that were submitted in advance, but I do see Gary Osaward from our own transit task force. You have your hand raised. Longtime HPKCC member and former board member. So
yes,
Gary,
this is a follow-up to Julia's questions on many of these JCDecaux bus stop shelters. The system showing when the buses are coming has broken down, and they never seem to get repaired. It takes a long time even to get broken benches repaired on them. It seems like they're saying, oh, well, everybody uses the app now, but not everybody has uses of the app, or they're rushing to get to the bus and don't have time to do it, to go into it. And so and then you get there, and then it's showing no information being displayed. And or the things are blank and stay blank for months. 55th and Hyde Park Boulevard is one where this is a frequent problem, especially on the northwest corner for the 55 and the 171, which gets lots of use there. And as a comment to add to what Julia said about the app. Thank you.
gotcha. Thank you, Gary. Thank you. All right, and actually we do have another hand raised from HPKCC's very own board president, Luis McCurry. If we could unmute Luis.
Yeah,
Here we
click
go.
There, we can hear
There you
you
go.
now. We got you.
All right.
Thanks, Nick.
Great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I just want to first of all say a huge thank you to everybody who came out tonight. First of all, to CTA, the most improved transportation information anywhere in the city has been CTA this year. COVID has wiped out a lot of your drivers, and yet somehow you managed to get these announcements out on all the trains, the announcements out on the buses that we're really sorry, we don't have a driver to cover this route. That's really crucial, because I can wait the extra 15, 20 minutes if I know it's coming. And that's just to say thank you hugely. Secondly, it's been really, really, really hard, I know, to get enough drivers to cover it. So what you've done has been phenomenal. You've hired women. I see almost every train that I ride, almost every bus that I ride, there's now a woman driver. That's huge, because women pay attention, not being sexist, of course, but women pay attention to the care and concerns of their riders. They pay attention to people on the train. It's just really quite remarkable to see how many women are there. So I just want to say, CTA, thank you very much for all you're doing. To CDOT, bless your hearts, we're getting bike paths all over the place that make a huge difference. For those of us that bike ride, it's really wonderful. Thank you for the signage. Thank you for the painted lanes downtown. Thank you for all the work you've done to make it so it's safer for we who ride bikes. It just is huge when you're riding along and you see a stoplight downtown. Says bikes should stop. That's just awesome. So the work you've done in the last 5 years is amazing. And finally, to Metra, as one who really, the Metra trains are my places to get my work done. And so you get on the Metra train and you plug in your computer and you can actually spend an hour working and enjoying, looking up all the things, sending out all your emails. It's just a really pleasurable place. So thank you for putting the electrical connections in and making it possible for those of us who commute 2 hours a day to work to actually get some work done. And then finally, I just want to quickly say thank you to Roger and Gary, who've been doing this with the Transit Task Force for the last several years and bringing the information out to HPKCC. HPKCC is an organization that's been around for 74 years and designed essentially to do just this, to provide public engagement on ideas, on information, on organizations, so people know what's going on and so people have a way to put their ideas, their concerns into the mix. It's only through public engagement that we can make a difference. And it's only through all of us working together we can make a difference. I mean, except for Brian, who can do kind of everything all the time. It's this wonderful possibility that we can come together and raise issues about the number 6 and raise issues about the number 14 and look at what's happening with the red light. Those are things we would never talk about in polite circles and people would listen to us. But at a transit forum, people listen and something gets done. So thank you for coming and making this possible. We'll do more of these. And finally, what we know is that global warming is really here. And driving cars is not the way of the future, or at least not driving cars with gasoline engines. So anything that public transit can do to get fewer cars on the road and more of us in bikes, in trains, and things that don't pollute the atmosphere mean the legacy that we're giving our children, which in my book is the most important thing. We're giving our children a chance to breathe above ground because the air will not be so polluted. So thank you for everything you're doing to make the air cleaner by getting fewer cars on the road and more bikes and scooters and trains out there doing the job. So on behalf of HPKCC, thank you. We're going to do this again. We're going to do lots more forums like this because the idea is when people talk together, when people put their ideas out there, working together, people can change things. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work, as Roger and Gary will tell you, but by doing it, we can do amazing things. And then finally, to say a huge thank you to Nick and to Ali for putting together both the emceeing of the show and making sure that the website and the computer information works for everybody. It's just been a really wonderful way to learn how we can reach the masses during a time in COVID when people are trying to stay safe and trying to stay home, but still be aware and make a difference in their town, in their community, and we think this does it. So thanks to everybody who took part in this. Thanks to all of you guys who worked really, really hard to make it happen. Most importantly, thank you to our speakers that came out and gave us the information, gave us the ideas, so we know where to send our comments to, so we know where to come for the next meeting. All this is just so valuable, and we will be able to pass that information along to our members. Thank you much, and I hope everybody has a safe and wonderful night.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luis. Okay. So we have a couple final questions, and then we're going to wrap up. So if anybody has a final question or you want to raise your hand or put it in the chat, please do. I'm going to pass it over to David and David Poe, if you get unmuted and yeah, there you go.
Hey, Mike, this is for you. I'm wondering, why wasn't the city more involved or supportive of the Fair Transit South Cook pilot? And where was the city on this?
Well, I appreciate the question, but I'm not going to speak for the mayor and the CTA. I'll let them answer that question. It was an easy call for us to make. The president came to us and asked us if we'd participate, and we did. I mean, I think you understand there's probably some complications with the CTA, but I don't speak for them.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, David. Okay, then we had another question. I think this is for Mark about the bike routes. This was submitted in advance. Could the bike routes be marked and patched annually so that like it shows the questions or the comment says it shows the respect for bike lanes by CDOT, encourages biking and prevents auto versus bike accidents?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't disagree. I'd like to, I as much as the next person like to see a well-marked bike lane. Definitely, as a few folks have said, sometimes it feels like things go into a black hole, but submitting to 311 does get to somebody so that they at least know the issue. Also, reaching out to your ward office is helpful. The alderman has a lot of, has the ability to also reach out to CDOT, whoever needs attention, and also has, an allocation of funding as well to be able to make fixes that perhaps aren't in other budgets. So reaching out with those specific questions definitely does go to somebody.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Okay, let's see. So, all right. I'm just looking at the chat. And there's a couple, we'll finish with the chat, and then I see your hand, Gary, as well. So Coretta Pruitt, you had a question. You said, you may have said this, however, when with all modes of transportation devices, or when will all modes of transportation devices being used together?
And that's bikes, foot, pedestrians, scooters, bikes, cars, buses. When will all of that be? What's the deadline or time frame when all modes of transportation will be in use together?
And I'll open that up to the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Coretta. Mark or Michael? Any thoughts on that?
It's a good question. I don't have the answer to that, unfortunately, which is not a helpful answer, but that's either it's either above me or outside me, but I totally get where you're coming from, and I think it's a great goal.
Thanks, Mark. All right. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we will take, I don't see any more questions in the chat, so we'll finish off. We'll take a final question or comment from Gary Osaward, and then we will wrap up. So Gary, we can get Gary unmuted.
Yes, I would like to second what Louise said, and the others, thanking everyone, whether guests or presenters or managers, for getting this information out, and for encouraging follow-up by people to ask you additional questions. We always think of things afterwards, and would like lines of communications and things, but thank you. But I can't leave without a challenging one that I'm sure that I don't expect answers to this, but we have to do something about the crimes and assaults things too. It's easy for people to make suggestions, oh, bring back conductors or do this, do that, or saturate with the police so that they aren't doing their job in other areas, perhaps. So is it something that's going to be difficult and don't just depend on it going away by itself as things go up and down. This is really critical, and you're not going to get people back if they feel they're in a trapped environment on transportation. Thanks.
Thank you, Gary. All right. That is going to wrap up our Q&A session, and it's going to wrap up our community dialogue. So on behalf of the Hyde Park Kenwood Community Conference, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight for our Transit Task Force Community Dialogue. I want to thank Michael Gillis and David Rubino from Metra. I want to thank Jennifer Henry and Franny Ritchie from CTA, Mark Bennett from CDOT, and David Poe from Active Transportation Alliance. I also want to thank our leaders of the Transit Task Force Committee, Roger Huff, Gary Osaward. Thank you so much for all your hard work. I want to thank our board members, Nicholas Doolin, Raquel Irvin, Brian Glenn, and of course, I want to thank our very own board president of HPKCC, Louise McCurry, and for everyone who really participated tonight and who helped put this together. The conversation does not end. This is the second Transit Task Force community dialogue that we have had. The conversation doesn't end today. HPKCC wants everyone's voices to be heard. And once again, if you want to learn more about HPKCC and get involved, please visit our website. It's really easy, www.hydepark.org. Become a member of our organization, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Without anything else, I want to thank you all once again. Please stay safe, and everybody, please have a great night.